Want to win the inventory game? With Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer, you can lock in trade-ins before your competitors even blink. Faster deals, better margins, lock in and load up today at b2b.kbb.com.
Hey, this is Daily Drive, executive producer Jake Neer in Detroit. Thanks for joining me for this bonus episode of the show. Earlier this week, I was at Rivian's offices and facilities in Plymouth, Michigan, just outside of Detroit, where CEO RJ Scaringe sat down with Axios reporter Joann Muller for a fireside chat with the Automotive Press Association. On Thursday's show, we brought you a short story about his comments on the importance of software-defined technology architectures in the coming years. He says he's strongly convicted that automakers will need to have SDV architectures in the next decade to survive. But what exactly does that mean, and why is he so bullish on it? On this episode, we wanted to bring you that full portion of the conversation because his explanation is pretty interesting and illuminating, at least when it comes to his point of view on all of this. Here's that piece of Rivian CEO RJ Scaringe's conversation with Joann Muller.
There's a number of companies in China, I'd say more than 5, less than 10, that have technology that's very different than the rest of the world. And it's because they started recently. And these are new companies, and if you're starting a company from scratch, you design things in a different way. And if you allow me, I'll just describe what I mean by that.
Yeah, please. I'm very curious.
So when you look at the electronics and software architecture that's in every vehicle sold in the United States, with the exception of a Rivian or a Tesla, the beginnings of that network architecture date all the way back to the 1960s. And they go back to the very first piece of electronics that existed in the car, the first microcontroller. And that first microcontroller was alongside of a fuel injection system. So for those car enthusiasts, remember like the old Bosch K-tronic and all these very early 50, 60 year ago electronic fuel injection systems. That was the first time the car went from a fully analog thing to having its first piece of compute inside the car. And at the time, this is in the 1960s, car companies said, this isn't our core competency. We're not going to develop this ourselves. We'll work with companies like Bosch to build these systems. And that was the first emergence of what we now call an ECU. And that was an ECU, an electronic control unit, that was focused on a function or domain. So we now would call that, that's a domain controller. That ECU is a domain controller. And then, not in a planned way, not in a way that was architected, but nonetheless it happened over the next 60 years. All these different areas of the vehicle started to add intelligence to themselves. So you would add a microcontroller with your HVAC system. You'd add a microcontroller with your seats. And everything that had any form of intelligence or control logic started to have these little ECUs. And again, it wasn't like overnight. It was over a half a century. And fast forward to today, a modern car will have 100 to 150 of these little ECUs, these little domain controllers. And it's like an awful field of weeds. Each of these ECUs is its own hardware stack. Each has its own little island of software. That island of software is made by a supplier. The suppliers, in fact, generally don't write the software themselves. They hand it to a third party, often in India. And so the layers of abstraction between the actual code and the manufacturer are 2 to 3 levels across 100 to 150 different controllers. And that's a mess. It's hard to manage, but it was sort of livable. You could live with it in a world where the software was locked, meaning you had to do all this incredible coordination effort. So if you were involved in software and manufacture at an OEM, your job would be coordinating amongst many different suppliers. Those suppliers would be building these ECUs. Those ECUs would communicate over a CAN network, and you'd lock it. And then along came this idea of, what if we wanted to update it? And so let me use just a very simple sequence to illustrate the point. If I were to walk up to a Rivian or to any car, and the sequence of events that occurs, the lights change orientation, there's an audible noise in the exterior of the car obviously unlocks, the security systems disengage, the seat adjusts, the HVAC comes on, something happens with the music, the screens come on. Let's see what else. The car may lower. And if you look on average, the number of companies involved with managing that sequence of events that occur when you walk up to the car for it to unlock is around 15. And so if you want to change that sequence, the exercise is like a mind-numbing process of coordinating amongst 15 different companies. Whereas in a Rivian, I could change the sequence of events this morning. We could agree right now that every Rivian on the road will have a different unlock sequence, and we could have it out by the afternoon with an OTA because we control the entire stack. And so what Rivian did differently in Tesla and then these more than 5, less than 10 Chinese companies is they said rather than having this distributed set of many, many ECUs, let's have a centralized compute platform where we own obviously the whole computer, but importantly, we own the whole software stack. So we own the operating system, the real-time operating system, we own the applications layers, we own the middleware layer, and by owning that entire platform, you can then create new features very easily. The coordination costs come way down. And it was actually that software platform I just described that we licensed to Volkswagen for $5.8 billion. And the reason for that licensing deal is what I just described, is they need a solution quickly to have a technology that's competitive against the Chinese alternatives. And so there's less than 10 companies, car companies in the world that have this. There's 2 that have it outside of China. And for us, it was sort of an obvious decision. If you're designing a system from scratch, you wouldn't say, I'm going to go coordinate with 100 to 150 different suppliers to make these small little islands of hardware and small little islands of software, have to manage it through these horrifically tall stacks of requirements documents that have to get disseminated across all these different suppliers. You'd say, I'm going to build computers, I'm going to build a software operating system, and I'm going to build an applications layer that we own. But to do that, you need thousands of software engineers, you need computer design engineers. So it's just a very different skill set topology than what car companies have historically had.
Right. Okay. Well, so that's a good segue to the Volkswagen partnership. Is it, maybe partnership's not the right word. I'd like to hear from you. Is it a pure licensing deal? You give them the software and they tweak it for their uses, or are you co-developing anything with them? Obviously, they're giving you a lot of money, which is also helpful.
So they're also now our second largest shareholder. So every quarter I get the shareholder listing. And number 1, our largest shareholder is Amazon. But number 2 is Porsche SE, which is, I grew up a Porsche fan and I grew up restoring classic Porsches. So seeing that always makes me smile. It's sort of
with $5.8 billion, right?
Yeah. So what we've structured is we have a joint venture that deploys the technology. And something like this, the reason I think for the scale of this deal is it's not an easy thing to integrate. And then what do I mean by that? You can't half do it. You can't say I'm going to do a half of a zonal architecture and half of a domain-based architecture. You have to really jump into it. And in the first go around, you may not be able to get it perfect, but over time, you can scrape away a lot of those extraneous ECUs. And what do I mean when I say you can't get it perfect? Let's say you're a seat sourcing person at a traditional car company. And for the last few decades, you've sourced seats with a set of requirements that include functions, and those functions are mostly software. So the seat will have 6 presets. It will move forward at this speed. It'll go down at this speed. It'll come up at this speed. It'll have a torque release if it, let's say, squishing a leg in the back of this level. Those are all software requirements. And the seat then comes with an ECU. And so, of course, we don't want a seat with an ECU. We want a dumb seat because we do want ourselves to do all the thinking. So it takes a lot of work with the suppliers to reverse out of a lot of this quote-unquote value-added content that historically they would put into the car that is simply no longer needed. And so if you do the full boundary diagram of what's the amount of cost save, we're talking many thousands of dollars of cost save by removing this heap of unnecessary ECUs. and instead relying on the zonal controllers to do most of the decisioning and control logic. And so to do that, it's more than just here's a zip drive with the software. It's like we have to integrate it. We have to also work with the teams to understand that our sourcing approach is now different. Reliance on some of these big giant tier ones that historically, they've had huge levels of control over a vehicle program. The power shifted where no longer they have any, they have very little control in a program like this. And so it's a reset of almost entirely how you work on the electronics of the car.
When we come back, we'll hear more from this conversation with Rivian CEO RJ Scaringe.
Inventory is tight. Competition is fierce, but Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer gives you the edge. With direct access to consumer trade-ins, you can lock in more of the used inventory you need and load up your lot. Dealers using Instant Cash Offer cut cost to market by 3.7% and close deals faster with new tools like counteroffer. That means more margin, less hassle. Whether you're looking to boost your used car pipeline or streamline your acquisition strategy, it's time to lock in and load up. Visit b2b.kbb.com to request your demo and see how Kelley Blue Book can help you win more deals more often.
As a follow-up to that, will you license your technology to other car makers as well?
We're certainly open to it. We've had a lot of interest. We're right now we're very focused on executing the large number of programs that we have with VW. And so I say VW Group and we think of Volkswagen, but I think everyone here knows, but that represents a very broad spectrum of brands. So it's Porsche, that's Bentley, that's Skoda, that's Cupra, that's Audi. I mean, so there's a very large spectrum of brands and a lot of products that come in. And so we have, I think like 31 programs that need to launch over the next, 3/4 of a decade. And it's a ton of programs. And so the way we've looked at it is to say, let's successfully launch a number of these programs before we engage in these other discussions. And, so one of the first programs, which I think is going to be just a remarkable car, is something called the ID1. It's the VW ID1. You can Google it. There's pictures of it. And it's a $22,000 electric car. It's very much utilizing our network architecture and ECU topology to allow that cost structure to be hit. It's not going to be sold here in the United States. I wish it was, because I'd love to own one. But it represents just how much cost efficiency can be achieved through this type of an architecture. And not yet announced, but on the other end of the spectrum is a flagship product under one of VW Group's brands that will also launch. And so the beauty of that is it's in some ways like the ultimate demonstration of the platform to show it from a $22,000 car all the way through a flagship. And it's the proof that Rivian is capable of working with a large, complex, car company to deploy the technology. So our view is launch those products well, and then there'll be lots of other options. The thing I would note, and I'll open it up for Q&A, I would say emphatically that it's inconceivable to me that a car company can exist and maintain market share by 2035 and not have a software-defined architecture. I think today you can get by with this mess of ECUs and really inefficient software architecture. And by the way, it's an environment that is nearly impossible to hire capable software engineers into, because you get hired and you're immediately just doing supplier management. So I think every single car company, if they want to maintain market share, will have to make this transition over the next 10 years. And so I think every car company has three choices. I think they can do it themselves. It's very, very hard to do. It's very different than the skill sets that have been accumulated and built over the last 100 years. They can license it from a third party like us, or they can try to do it with existing suppliers. But the very obvious challenge with existing suppliers is they are like deeply conflicted. So imagine you're a supplier that makes a lot of money selling ECUs. The very nature of a zonal architecture is to eliminate all those ECUs. And so if you were to just look at it across the whole auto industry, every car should have around $3,000 to $4,000 less cost in it. And so that that cost is coming from somewhere. The OEMs, it's not their cost, it's the supplier's cost. So there's $3,000 to $4,000 per car that I think by 2035, certainly by 2040, no at-scale manufacturer will be doing that anymore. They won't be able to burden the car with that much cost, putting aside just the inefficiencies and the ineffectiveness of trying to do things like over-the-air updates. And so I call that out because I do think there will be companies that come and say, hey, we'd like to work with you on this.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Some of them are likely to fall by the wayside if those revenues.
But I think all of them will recognize they have to. I think they'll try it. I think many will try.
Yeah.
I think many will fail. I think some will be successful, but we'll see.
Rivian CEO RJ Scaringe spoke this past week during a fireside chat with the Automotive Press Association at the EV Makers campus in Plymouth, Michigan. He spoke with Axios reporter Joann Muller. Thanks for listening to this bonus episode of Daily Drive. We'll be back on Monday with a brand new full episode of the show.